This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in colour, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day I produced a Louis, had a track with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithms really aren't that happy. If a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we could Xtra. Whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the track Xtra.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and this incredibly handsome fellow over there is my old friend and partner in crime, Richard Freeman, the zoological director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology and internationally famed explorer, zoologist, and damn nice good egg. Now, quite a lot of you, especially if you read the credits of this show, will have heard of Daisy Swan, and known more as Miss Daisy, and she lives in Germany, from whence she sends me all sorts of interesting stories, and they've been mounting up. So we're going to have a look at some of them today, and we're going to see what has happened, what we can talk about. Now, the first one is a undeniably great piece of news, or I think it is, and I can't imagine Richard's going to disagree. An amazing flock of nearly 80 white storks seen for the first time since the Middle Ages, and it's in Cornwall. I think that's bloody brilliant. The last breeding pair to be recorded in Britain was in 1416, nesting on a cathedral in Edinburgh. And the birds are thought to have migrated to the Lizard Peninsula from West Sussex, where they were reintroduced in 2016. That, by the way, is part of the Knapp Castle Rewilding Project, which has been written about by Lady Isabella Tree in her fantastic book Wilding, which I rant on and on and on about on this show, and I'll continue to rant on. But you've not read it, have you, Richard?
I have not, no.
Well, you know what you're getting for Christmas, because it's an absolutely fantastic book, and it also turns the popular idea of how to do rewilding on its head. And we're going to come back to that subject in a minute, because there's another story in this tranche of stories from Daisy which I think covers that quite nicely. John Rance, a volunteer at the Cornwall Wildlife Trust, says, "Bird migration blows my mind, frankly. It's one of nature's wonders that we're only just beginning to understand. People will be familiar with swallows returning every year. It's just amazing. And 80 wild storks is quite a sight." Now, what do you think about that, Richard?
Well, I think it's great. It's great when animals return to Britain that we lost a long time ago, and the more species we get back, the better. As I've said before, I'm all for bringing back all the animals that we wiped out.
It's been discovered more and more in recent years. I wish that stupid bloody dog had stopped barking, but somebody dared to walk past the window, and he is protecting us, I think. And by the way, if you hear a clacking sound, it's Archie shaking himself or scratching and rattling the dangly thing on his collar that's got his name and address on it. They say, Richard, that every animal affects its environment, And when you reintroduce animals, the big one being the beaver, when you reintroduce animals into an environment, it helps it get it back to what it should be. But what do storks do for the environment, apart from eat frogs and make big untidy nests on top of Dutch roofs?
What do storks do for the environment? Well, they're a major wetlands predator. They keep the numbers of other things down. They feed on fish, frogs, small mammals. So they're top of the wetlands, well, the European wetlands food chain.
And
apart from things like Wells catfish.
And I suppose that by eating lots of frogs and newts and fish and things, they're actually encouraging the frogs, fish, newts and things to breed more. And so, peculiarly, despite the fact that you might think introducing a big wetlands apex predator in would be bad for the environment because it would eat all the prey species, in fact it encourages them to breed and actually increases the numbers of prey species.
And they also look very nice as well.
Do you know anything about storks?
No, very little.
I can tell stork from butter.
Excuse me, can you tell stork from butter? No.
They bring babies.
These are two cultural comments that probably nobody under the age of 50 will actually understand. But now we have another story, which is, again, from the lovely Daisy. And it's very similar in a sort of way. It's how feral water buffalo in Hong Kong and the wild areas of Hong Kong are actually bringing nature back to abandoned post-industrial land. I'll just read you a bit of it. Over the course of more than 3,000 years since water buffalo were first domesticated in Asia, these half-ton mammals have spread across the world. Today they're estimated to number more than 200 million in 77 countries on 5 continents. For generations they were prized as powerful plough-pulling draft animals and providers of nutritious milk. But in recent years, buffalo have begun to earn a reputation amongst conservationists as handy landscape managers and a crucially important ecosystem engineer. Now, they were kept for years in Hong Kong. Domesticated buffalo have long had a justified reputation as gentle giants, which remains largely true of Hong Kong's population, the feral descendants of farmed buffalo which now roam free. And the Hong Kong City University Feral Buffalo Project, which is piecing together research showing how feral buffalo on Lantau Island in West Hong Kong interact with human neighbours and impact the ecosystems, helping trees grow by grazing wet grasses, clearing invasive plants, and creating biodiverse wetland clearings. Water buffalo, what do you think?
Well, they're also very good at working in pubs because they're draft animals.
Oh dear.
I've heard something similar to this a couple of years ago. Somebody, I think it was in Britain, was doing something similar with European bison. They'd got some land and they were using European bison to engineer the landscape. And it's thought that mammoths did this as well. And the idea of bringing back mammoths to Siberia. It's that they would engineer the landscape and turn it into mammoth steppe.
Well, mammoth steps are what you need when walking on the moon. What actually do water buffalo and other large herbivores like that, how do they manage the wetlands?
They churn up the earth. Well, certainly on bison on land, they churn up the earth and aerate it and allow more seedlings to get into the earth.
Now, again, going back to Lady Isabella Tree's book, one of the interesting things in there, the British government, being their normal unhelpful selves, wouldn't give them a licence to introduce wild boar. I believe wild boar are back there now naturally because wild boar is spreading across large chunks of Britain. But as they couldn't get wild boar, they got one of the oldest and most primitive domesticated pigs and just let them go. And they churned up a lot of the wetland areas, a lot of the marshy and boggy areas, and they improved the biodiversity 100-fold. And it makes one wonder, why don't people do this more often?
Well, I think it's because most people don't know, and the government hates the idea of bringing back wild animals to Britain because for some reason successive governments have hated animals. We're the most timid and backward of European countries when it comes to rewilding.
One thing, again, back in Isabella Tree's book, she writes about a project in Holland where they've been using European bison and wild boar and wild horses to rewild the landscape, and it seems to have borne remarkable results. The one thing that they've done in Holland, because they are more forgiving and permissive about such things, is that when the animals have died of natural causes, they've let them lay there and let them die and be eaten as carrion. Whereas in Britain, when any of the Knapp Castle large mammals died, they had to be the bodies had to be taken away and cremated as per DEFRA instructions, which again takes out a large chunk of the cycle of life, I think.
Yeah, Britain has to be the European country that is the most unnatural in its ecosystem. The body of a large animal would feed things like ravens and other carrion birds and burying beetles and all sorts of things, and the goodness would go back into the earth.
Part of the reason Britain, I mean, we're the only country in Western Europe not to have wolves again, and we're one of the few not to have bears again, because bears are now doing quite well in Scandinavia and in France and in Germany and in little bits of Spain. But the reason we haven't got wolves is because we're an island. However, again, somebody you've heard me talk about lots on this show over the years, the children's author Joan Aiken, and she wrote a series of books, starting with a book called The Wolves of Willoughby Chase, set in an alternative 18th century, where wolves had come back through the newly built Channel Tunnel, because in this alternate universe the Channel Tunnel had been built back when it was first mooted back in the 18th century, And of course the wolves managed to come back through the tunnel and recolonise Britain. Unfortunately, our Channel Tunnel is so biosecure, I don't think anything larger than a golden hamster would be able to come back through it. There are talks, though, about people reintroducing wolves to Britain, aren't there?
There is, and more power to them. I think we should bring back the wolf and the brown bear to the Highlands of Scotland, possibly places in the north of England, possibly parts of Wales, places that can support them. We're not talking of hundreds and hundreds of them, we're talking about small but self-sustaining populations that can only be good for the environment and only be good for tourism.
Beavers have come back mostly by accident. There have been a couple of government-sanctioned reintroduction projects, but a lot of the reintroduction projects have been done by the self-styled introductionists who, as everybody who ever watches this show will know, Richard and I totally support these people who are doing unofficial reintroduction schemes, and they're the ones who introduced the European beaver back into parts of Britain. However, as a side note, what nobody apart from the hardcore cryptozoologists know, that there was a colony of Canadian beavers from 1969 until within the last 10 years on the River Axe in Somerset, which came from, I believe, they escaped from Cricket St Thomas Wildlife Park in the late 1960s. But that's changing the subject. But people have noticed now how the beaver has changed wetlands and done a lot to stop flooding, hasn't it?
It's engineered the environment in a great way, and that's just one example we should be sitting up and taking note of.
How do they stop flooding?
Because they lower, overall they will lower the watercourses. They'll dam them, but it'll cause them to spread out naturally rather than when there's a big flood for all the water to come rushing in at once. It'll go off down all the other channels and spread out.
And I suppose that as a lot of watercourses in Britain were submerged into concrete culverts over the last 100 years, it's going to cause them maybe even to burst with the amount of water going through, and it caused no end of damage. So yay for beavers. Now let's go to the next story of Daisy's. By the way, Daisy, if you're watching this, please send us some more stories, because I think this is totally fascinating. Here's a good one for you, Richard. Flight diverted after passenger finds live mouse in meal. Scandinavian Airlines, SAS, says one of its flights had to make an unscheduled landing after a mouse scurried out of a passenger's in-flight meal on Wednesday. The aircraft was flying from Norway's capital Oslo to Malaga in Spain, but had to divert to Copenhagen in Denmark instead. The diversion was in line with company procedures, as the ferry's stowaway posed a safety risk. How does mouse pose a safety risk?
Probably because if there was a cat on board, it would have been using anvils and dynamite and stuff to fight the cat.
Of course, and we all know that mouse evolution has spread since Tom and Jerry across the English-speaking world.
I wonder what the meal was that the mouse jumped out of.
A train service in southern England, by the way, had to be terminated mid-journey after two squirrels boarded a carriage and one refused to get off. Yay for invasive rodents, I think. It just says here, Jarl Borestad experienced the incident firsthand and told the BBC News Channel in a recorded video that the mouse escaped from the box of food that the woman sat next to him on the flight was opening. He said that the situation was very calm and that people were not stressed at all. However, he admitted that he did put his socks over his trousers so the mouse did not crawl up his legs. Well, I don't know about you. I want to know what happened to the mouse, don't you?
Yeah.
History does not relate that. We've only got one story left from Daisy this time, and it's a particularly sad one. I should really have ended it around, so we ended on the mouse, but I didn't. So this is from The Guardian. Rare polar bear shot dead by police in Iceland after being thought a threat. A rare polar bear that was spotted in a remote village in Iceland was shot by police after being considered a threat. Authorities have said the bear was killed in the northwest tip of the country after police consulted the National Environment Agency, which declined to have the animal relocated, according to the West Fjords police chief Helgi Jensen. It's not something we like to do, Jensen said. In this case, the bear was very close to a house with an old woman living in there. The owner, who was alone, was frightened and locked herself upstairs as the bear rummaged through her garbage, Jensen said. She contacted her daughter in Reykjavik by satellite link and called for help. So, I think that's absolutely bloody appalling.
Polar bears are being forced southwards due to global warming caused by humans, because the pack ice is melting sooner and sooner and sooner. So they're all over the world where polar bears are naturally found. They're coming further south. So it's the problem we made ourselves, and our solution to it is to kill them. Well, the Icelandic Environmental Agency have acted like idiots, and lazy, stupid idiots, because they couldn't be bothered to relocate it. It sounds to me like simply they couldn't be bothered to spend the time and money doing what they're supposed to be doing. Disgusting. It reminds me of when they murdered the walrus. The walrus that turned up in Denmark.
Norway.
Norway, sorry.
Denmark was fine to it. Holland was fine to it.
Yeah. They shot the walrus. Ridiculous, pathetic, cowardly, backwards.
And one would like to think that as we are now a quarter of the way through the 21st century, that the human race had progressed a little bit further. I'm going to be back on Saturday. What am I going to be talking about on Saturday? I don't know. I haven't recorded it yet. Big thank you to Daisy for these stories. I've rather enjoyed this format of the show, to do once in a while, to have a list of stories that me and Richard can just talk about like this. I think that's rather fun, and I think we'll do it again. Like I said, I'll be back on Saturday. God alone knows what I'm going to be talking about, but we will get there in the end. And if you're watching, then I will be there doing the notifications and the live chat and everything, and I will undoubtedly be seeing you.